Ready? Good morning, everyone. Today is January 25th, 2024. The time is 10:30 a.m. and I'm calling the special IDA meeting for the city of Mount Vernon to order. Can you please do the rolls?
Absolutely. Mayor,
Here.
Commissioner,
Present.
Corporation Council. Present. Saunders.
Here.
And the controller. Here. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Okay, we can proceed with the agenda.
Very good. Before you is the final resolution. Being requested. Oh, sure.
Yeah, because I don't know, and I don't know if your voice is being
Never been
captured.
here. Yeah. Morning. Michael Purdy, Transaction Counsel to the IDA. What is before you is the resolution, the final resolution for the 115 McQuestion project. We have conducted a public hearing and also there was an inducement resolution authorizing the consideration of this project by the board. Here for you for final approval. Just to talk a little bit about the schedule of events for this morning. The first thing is me to give just a brief overview of what you're about to hear today. Following the public hearing, we did have an opportunity to work with the school district to get enrollment numbers based on the IDA existing projects that have been approved and that are still outstanding. What we learned was that of the 1,274 units in the residential properties that the IDA has previously approved, approximately 275 of those units are senior housing, and there's about 6 students that are enrolled in those properties. The balance, which is 999, there's 153 students enrolled. So you did hear previously both from the school district letter that was provided on January 4th and also is presented to you as a copy before you today, that their projection was that for every 3 to 4 units, there would be 1 school child that would be attending the schools, which would put the number at approximately 75, give or take. You also heard from the study from the National Association of Home Builders that the number is closer to 1 to 10. So we wanted to drill down and get data from our own community to see what was reflected. And that's generally the number that we've come up with, which is that basically 1 to 6.5, which brings the number to 48, which is halfway between what the school district's position is and also from the National Association of Home Builders. What does corroborate that number is there is 22 West First Street, which is probably one of the newer buildings that the IDA approved some years ago. Also in close proximity to where this project would be. This project would be on the 100 block of McQuestion. And 22 West First is right by where the Mount Vernon West train station is. That is a primarily affordable project, 189 units. It's also the largest of the IDA projects that are still outstanding. 159 units are affordable workforce, 30 units are market rate. And that building has school district enrollment of about 30. So again, that's 1 to 6.5. It's the largest of the projects. Again, all things for you to consider prior to, as part of your deliberation as to whether you will approve the final resolution. So at this point in time, if Victoria is on, I was going to turn it over to her to just give a brief overview of the update to the cost benefit analysis, because that did have an impact.
Good morning. As always, when calling in remotely, I first want to make sure that everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Terrific. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me to be here this morning. I do miss coming down in person, but I am glad for remote technology. So Mike just summarized the discussions with the school district. I used the school district numbers. As he says, and the changes to the reports, you have in front of you a January 19th of 2024 date. There's one small change, and then I'll tell you the effect of the different school enrollment. We are now including the sales tax, the property transfer tax that the city collects on every project. It's paid by the seller rather than the buyer, and therefore it hadn't been in our list of fiscal benefits to the city previously. We are now including it even though the seller pays it, and the result of that is $119,000 of fiscal benefits directly to the city that weren't present in the prior reports. The school district change, as Mike explained, we've come up using that data with in between the two, the initial estimates that I had calculated using the other report as a basis and the school district data, resulting in 48 school district enrollments expected as a result of this project. And the result of that, not surprisingly, is that in terms of the pilot payments directed toward the school district, which had previously been at around a break-even level, meaning that the project, all other things being equal, was just about on track to cover the costs of any students who were newly enrolled in the district. Obviously, increasing the number of students pushes that to the point where, in fact, if all of the students are in fact entirely new to the district, the pilot payments to the school district will not cover the new per student costs in this analysis. So, for example, for year one, we're going from about a $4,000 excess to just about $138,000 gap in year one. And then over time, that gap increases, assuming that school district costs escalate and the pilot payments follow what we had already been looking at. So the only change is to increase the number of students enrolled from the project from 33 to 48. The spending per existing student has been held steady. The new student school level costs have increased to $962,469. If you're following, this is page 8. And because the levy is not required to cover all of the per student costs, that's $455,937 estimated levy for the first year required to cover the 48 students, assuming 100% newly enrolled. The pilot payment for year one is estimated to be $317,979, which is what creates that gap of $137,958. No other changes have been made to this analysis. I mentioned the 119,000 additional net benefit. So it's a significant increase in costs at the school district level, understandably. And so if we want to go back to the summary of results, this is on page 2 of the report. This is where you see the effects of that change. So the new incremental costs to the school district over a period of 30 years are about $13.3 million. Just looking at the fiscal costs and the fiscal benefits, rather than being just about a break-even benefit cost ratio, the benefit cost ratio drops to 84 cents of benefits to every dollar of financial assistance provided to the applicant. And that's over 30 years on a present value basis, estimated at about $5.5 million of a negative benefit. That is cost incurred above what you would expect to collect from this pilot structure. As we've discussed in prior meetings about this project, they are making significant investments in the city, some of which are enabling the city to avoid paying for these costs itself. So the second iteration of the benefit cost ratio adds in approximately $8.5 million of net benefit to the city that the project is putting in as community investment. When the direct community investment is considered, the benefit cost ratio increases to a positive $1.18 of benefits to the city for every $1 of fiscal assistance provided to the applicant, for a net benefit on a present value basis of just over $6.2 million. I will say, as you all understand, because we've talked about this before, the benefit cost ratio is calculated at a point in time. The $6.2 million net benefit calculated with the project and the direct community investment is over the period of 30 years. Whereas over time, there is that gap that we are now calculating for pilot payments, not entirely covering estimates for 48 new school enrollments. The last thing I want to point out is that based on some of the conversations, and especially the mayor's discussion of students who are already enrolled in the Mount Vernon Public Schools, potentially moving into the project because of the hopes that current community residents will move into the new, clean, and very safe facility. So I do make a note on page 7 stating that my assumptions here, and this has always been the case, is that every one of the 48 students is new to the district. I'm not trying to estimate how many would be new. That is something that will occur organically as the project is built and residents enroll. But I did want to make a little bit clearer that assuming every single student is new to the district is very conservative, and most likely there will be fewer who are absolutely new to the district. There is no rubric to make that estimate, so my report continues to be very conservative.
Okay, just a couple of other things before we turn it over to that I should have mentioned before to the applicant. There is 2 friendly amendments for you to consider with regard to the resolution. I've included a red line version as well as a clean version, and I'll just read that into the record. Just there would be new sections 7 and 8. Section 7 would indicate that the agency documents, and those are the contractual documents that we would enter into. This resolution is not a contractual document. It only provides authority. There is no obligation of see until there are contracts that are signed with the applicant. This provision says the agency documents shall include a provision whereby the parties will enter into a negotiation of a lease agreement that appoints the City of Mount Vernon Youth Bureau and/or Department of Recreation as manager of the community space for the term of the tax agreement or any extensions thereof, subject to an agreement on certain economics and the inclusion of commercially reasonable terms of operation, which includes a provision for nominal rent. Section 8 is the company agrees to use best efforts to hire City of Mount Vernon residents for at least 10% of the labor, construction related items and direct costs of 10%. So that's also another benefit that I think you'll hear from the applicant that they're willing to provide to the city. With regard to next steps, we have provided the applicant with all of the comments that have been provided during the public hearing. In addition, we've provided the letter from the school district that was shared on January 4th, as well as some other communications that we've received that have been outside of the public hearing. We did ask the developer to present their response to those comments for two reasons. One, it's good for the record. Number two, it's the least we can do for the people who've come here to take time and speak on the matters that are before you. So at this point in time, I'll turn it over to the applicant to make their presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Craig.
No.
Thank you. Good morning, honorable members of the board. I am going to review the responses of the sponsor of our development team to the comments made by the public. I'm going to read them, so please bear with me while I do. Those people know I prefer to speak extemporaneously, but in an effort to make sure that I've included the full scope of all of the comments that were made and not to omit any of them, to read the responses. Thank you. Honorable members of the board, I would like to provide for the record, the responses to the comments raised during the public comment period for our application. Community comments fell generally into two categories. One group of comments had to do with the procedures of the board and the way in which the board conducted its business. And other group of comments had to do with the specifics on the application itself. The procedural comments spoke to the time of the hearing and questioned whether or not the timing was ideal so as to facilitate the greatest amount of public input. Another comment had to do with the length of the comment period. And a third comment had to do with questioning the methodology and the independence of the third-party consultant that had been retained to analyze the sponsor's data, particularly as it related to school enrollment at Mount Vernon City School District Post. So in response, we note that the meetings have been duly scheduled and noticed, and that the comment period was kept open beyond the date of the hearing so as to allow for additional time for comment and input. In fact, 3 of the 11 responses which were submitted were provided during the extended comment period, which to us illustrates that the residents fully availed themselves of the mechanism for comment and for input. We further note that the independent professionals who have been evaluating the project are fully engaged by the IDA with no contingency by the applicant. This means the means and methods that the analysts use are consistent with the practices at the county level and neighboring communities such as New Rochelle and Yonkers. The public comments that were issued by the community in regard to the project specifically revolved around 5 general categories. 1, questioning whether or not, as a matter of public policy, the IDA or pilot should be used for commercial activity only, and to the exclusion of residential activity. A second comment, generally speaking, was that pilots should be used for business and job creation that lasts beyond the construction period. Another comment was that past pilots issued by previous IDA boards, did not take into account the long-term impact to the city, the school district, or the tax-paying homeowners. A 4th comment had to do with projects that receive pilots should commit to local hires and contracting. And the 5th general category of comments were that the burying of utility lines is a cost of doing business, not an improvement to the city's benefit. And that attracting higher income wage earners to the city is a risk that should be borne by the developer. So those were the 5 general categories in which comments were made during the public comment and input by the public. So in response to those comments, we note that the use of the IDA, including pilots, is an established municipal tool for the promotion of residential activity, especially when they are associated with benefits such as job creation and retention, public infrastructure improvements, and the proposed project provides for both, as well as for additional documented benefits, which I will review in a moment. Further, the project sponsors have a demonstrated record of local and minority hiring and contracting and have committed to such on this project. In fact, at the direction of this board, this commitment has been memorialized in the resolution. The independent cost benefit analysis estimates that the generation of approximately 29 permanent jobs that will be created post-construction. The cost of undertaking significant amounts of electrical and telecommunications infrastructure is not a normal development cost. In fact, many communities undertake this themselves to remove barriers to development. And the risk of attracting higher income wage earners to the development and to the neighborhood is in fact a risk that the development team is prepared to take. Data provided by the New York Department of Education shows that over the last 10 years, enrollment in the Mount Vernon City School District has decreased by over 1,000 students. And again, this is sourced from the New York State DOE. Since 2017, school budgets have increased by 8%, while enrollment has dropped by 14% during the same period. The data suggests that there is little correlation between student enrollment and district costs, and that the district can in fact absorb a marginal increase in student enrollment, whether you accept our original numbers or the revised numbers provided by the storage report, given the years-long decline in student enrollment in the district. In summary, the actions requested by the board are wholly consistent with your newly adopted uniform tax exemption policy and municipal best practices. The project front loads capital and public benefits to the city in the form of permanent job creation, infrastructure improvements, sustainable design, construction, and operation, diversification of the city tax base through the additional retail tax revenue, and a state-of-the-art community facility controlled by the city for the use, benefit, and enjoyment of Mount Vernon youth and families. And finally, quality housing that increases options for working families and individuals who seek to live, work, and recreate in the city of Mount Vernon. So those constitute the responses of the applicant of our development team to the public comment. And I've made every effort to be faithful to the comments that were made during the public comment period. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just make one addendum or additional point of clarification, because I think there's a few documents coming around. The data that the school district provided to IDA Council on buildings in the city that have pilots encompassed a list of 14 total developments, including 203 Grambton Avenue or LaPorte, which is 159 units and was reported to have 0 school children on the school district provided data. And as well as the Enclave at Fleetwood, 179 units was also reported to have 0 school children. So I want to make sure that the board is aware of the comprehensive report that was provided by the school district to IDA.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bridge.
Well, I just have a question.
Sure.
Because it seems like the developer responded to what they have on the record.
Right.
From the school district. I was wondering, is there any follow-up response from the school district?
Well, I handed out,
Okay.
so if you want me to.
Well, they've responded to that. I just wanted to know, is there a supplemental response to their response?
I mean, certainly at this point, the board can ask any questions that you wish, and you can
Right.
use anything, that you want to
Yeah,
follow.
no, I was just given the courtesy.
Yep, sure.
I just want to contextualize this, because it's a letter, but I don't know. Is it the sentiment of the entire board? It's not signed by the president. There's no
Well,
context to
This,
this,
well, I'm sorry.
what was presented.
Well, I apologize.
That's all.
Because you did ask if I was the board president. I am on the IDA, so that's why I sent it. Thank you all for inviting me here today, and thank you all for considering, our numbers. And as I handed out the, information, we had some points there that I wanted you to consider. I guess that's what you are alluding to, And as we also discussed earlier, that the state is now obviously taking some of the money back, some of our state aid. So we're in a dilemma, quite of a dilemma here. So it's like that we considered.
If I can contextualize that last statement you just made, I mean, I think it's actually what I think we're all reacting to is an article this morning that Governor Hochul's budget, and it's just a budget proposal, has suggested that the hold harmless provision, which is that the state money that goes to support districts, that promises that no district shall receive less money than it received the year before, in fact, should be repealed or altered in the case of declining school districts, which obviously, as we've stated, is, this district has declined by 1,000 students over the last 10 years. So, the immediate response from Majority Leader Stuart Cousins was in opposition to that. So it's very much not settled, but I think to us, and I won't lie, there's been some frustration. The comments we keep hearing, we've heard over the last 2 years is, well, Hamilton School District can't take this. Well, all of a sudden we see in the news yesterday, the school's throwing, the district is throwing out the entire, districting program. And again, as we pointed out, over the last just 6 years, we see an 8% decline in enrollment and a 14% increase in budget. And now we're talking about a risk of the state decreasing their support because of that declining enrollment. And yet we hear this chorus continually of school kids, school kids, school kids. And it's just a highly recycled trope that we've heard, that has been around in communities around the state, around the country. And it just defies all the facts and math of what actually happens in the city. So,
We are a poor community here. We don't have a lot of money. We have not raised taxes, school taxes in years, maybe 9 years. So, we're trying.
is that true?
No, we have not. We have not.
The budget keeps going up though.
The taxes have not increased. So, we're trying to work with people. We know people are losing their homes. So we just want to consider all our tax bases.
Sure, no,
We want to
I mean,
educate all our.
perfect.
But it's gotta be a way
reason
that we
for
can
a great-
work together with you guys. So, maybe that's a conversation.
I think you're sort of defining the reason for long-term quality affordable housing that has youth facility and benefits, and as well as, pays its fair share and in fact adds kids, of which 51% of that cost is paid, of that revenue comes from the state. So
I would like to add, Mr. Saunders, that when we first proposed the project, we did reach out to the then superintendent and then school board president to make them aware of our plans to develop a youth facility, and invited them to suggest to us ways in which the district could participate in that. So going forward, if we're fortunate enough to go with this project, we would encourage the district to reach out to the city of Mount Vernon and find ways in which you can collaborate. And if the project is able to go forward, all of the residents of the building will be residents of the city of Mount Vernon. And to the extent that the district and the city can collaborate to make sure that they're receiving excellent programs, that was always our original.
I believe at that time, I don't believe the school district was able to sit on the board. We're not a voting member anyway, so we can't vote on anything, but we weren't on the board at that time.
No, this is why we
Proactively
proactively reached out to you. Absolutely.
It was a Zoom meeting with Dr. Hamilton and then president and 2 members of the school, and he made the offer, and it was in the school district's court to respond. But I think to the point what Jonathan's saying is that this whole form-based zoning was prior to the realignment of the K-8, in which the city, it was a comprehensive outreach. We reached out to all the stakeholders, school district, interested party, property owners, business owners, and the form-based zone was done prior to K through 8 model, and the school district unilaterally just made that change by input from the city. And now that we're here again, 10 years later, here we have the situation again proactively without, not well, proactively, but without input from the city. The school district is once again looking to change that model, and there would be an impact at Canton Hamilton. So it appears that the school district wants to be at the table of the IDA, does not provide the same opportunity or opportunity for the city to be at the table of the school district. And that's impacting development projects. So I think that's probably the underlying message as well. And be mindful that with the proposed budget by Governor Hochul of $233 billion, 27% of that goes to education, right? And so what they're saying is that from year to year, if your enrollment decreases, then that would impact your budget. It's not going to be the whole harmless for every single year, no matter what your enrollment is, you get the same number. So it appears that, and that's what I'm.
And again, it's an executive budget, right? It has a very long way to go.
Right.
And obviously you already see pushback from local electeds, right?
But it is what it is, but it's definitely on the table. And it's very real. Thank you.
Thank you.
Public hearing.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a public section there, but if you want to,
Just about this document.
From the school district.
From Scopoli from the lawyer.
it's
Yeah.
privilege and chair if you want to entertain that.
This is edited, this is a new letter.
I'm sorry, we're not, I guess we're not doing that, but to that point though, for me, and I just wanted to say that generally, procedurally, like I'd like to see that the entire board, I don't have enough to contextualize this 2-page letter that was presented to me. I don't know if this is it's just a district, it's not signed by the president. I don't know if there was a dissenting viewpoint. I don't know, was there a vote that this was the letter that should be in the record? I have no context for this.
What I can say is that there was a letter from Mr. Scopoli, who is the board counsel.
Okay.
I had an opportunity to just quickly read it ahead of time. I mean, it appears to be taken from that letter.
Okay.
That was sent to the board and is a part, of, the record and your consideration.
Okay.
So-
I mean, respectfully, it does seem kind of unfair that a non-voting board member can present a new document. The public comment period closed, right? The school board was invited to give feedback during the public comment period.
Yeah, my feeling is the board members can utilize anything that they want to ask any questions. So, if the board member wants to utilize that, and as I said before, I had an opportunity to look at it before. I mean, quite frankly, it's the same thing that Mr. Scopoli shared with everybody. So, for the most part, there was a beginning piece that he said, thank you very much, and sort of alluded to the fact that, the engagement with the school district is a lot better than it's ever been. And I think that's a testament to this board, because, we want to have good relationships with
Right.
affected tax jurisdictions.
Right.
And there's nothing new here. I think to your point, trustee Saunders, I think that how the school will benefit, they work with the city. The fact remains that most kids get in trouble between the hours 3 to 6. We're a city of latchkey kids. And I think the city will be able to provide a direct benefit to the school district if you guys opt to do some shared services or opt to, and then there's the whole component of during the daytime. What's the city want to do with this facility during the day hours? Could there be some sort of programming that you want to utilize that facility to join the city? So there's a lot of opportunities here to do some things, I believe. Early prevention programs, whatever the case may be, you have pre-K. I don't know. I mean, you guys have information in terms of what you need, but you essentially have a multi-million-dollar brand new state-of-the-art facility at your disposal to be operated by the city.
Victoria?
Yes,
Things. Can you help me to explain this? It's a $20,000 number. One one-time sales revenue for construction labor per diem. 20,911.
Okay, dude.
That, when even we were
What
over
page? I'm
it
sorry, what
yesterday.
page? What page, Joe?
Page 6.
Oh, Stephanie doing?
That's how we went over it yesterday. We like, we trying to figure out how do you get to that number. Up to in the upper right-hand corner.
Yep.
Can you explain this for me?
Yes. We know intuitively that the construction workers on site will be creating economic benefits within the city because workers buy gas, they buy sandwiches, they might stop at a local store on their way out of the city. So there's economic activity resulting from temporary construction workers, just as there is from permanent workers who are working in the city every single day over a long period of time. Trying to estimate what a construction worker is going to spend, given that they're temporary, there's two things that I take into consideration that led me to use the state per diem that covers spending for on-site workers traveling from out of town. For Westchester County, the state estimates that someone coming in and working at a site, whether it be, you know, in an office, someone's coming in from a Buffalo office of the state and is in Mount Vernon, or for any other purpose, the state estimates that the cost of a day's work in Westchester County is $50 for food and other incidentals. I therefore use that to estimate the amount of dollars that the construction workers could be expected to spend for every day that they are on site doing their work at the facility. And that, as I said, would include buying lunch, filling up their cars with gas, other incidentals that they might purchase. We understand that on some days, maybe they brought a bag lunch from home. We understand that some of them may in fact reside in the city of Mount Vernon. That is less likely because of the size of the city. So many of the workers who are not able to be found in Mount Vernon, despite all of the efforts that the construction managers will undertake, are coming in from outside. And the $50 per diem therefore becomes an estimate that is grounded in an outside third-party source. And I use it consistently when I'm analyzing projects in Westchester County. So from the $50 per diem, not everything that the construction workers are spending is taxable. A prepared sandwich is taxable. Stopping at the grocery store to buy something to take home for dinner is not. So I calculate that only a portion of that $50 of spending would be taxable. And then I estimate the sales taxes on the taxable portion of that spending. And Mike Curdy and I had a couple of conversations specifically about the allocation of the sales tax revenue collected in the city of Mount Vernon to make sure that I'm accurately reflecting who gets which dollar among the city, the school district, and Westchester County itself. So when you see
So let me just cut to the chase. So what's the formula that is being used here to this point, to this 20,911? That's because I just didn't know how we got there. I understand the methodology around what you're doing around the sales tax and the purchases and all of that. But I'm trying to figure out, how did we get to the 20,911? Right? I mean, I can follow the process on when you go down the bottom to the residential housing spending. I just can't follow the process for this top number here.
there are a couple of different levels of calculations that I conduct. I'm not sure how much detail you want. I take the $50 anticipated to be spent by each construction worker, and create an aggregate number. I reduce that on the assumption that, forgive me while I look that up, a portion of that is taxable. I apply the tax rate to the taxable portion of spending, again, as a lump sum, to calculate taxes collected in the city of Mount Vernon. And then taxes collected are allocated using another set of formulas among the different jurisdictions.
This is based on how many construction workers?
On-site workers,
At the top right, it's $50 times 99,000 and 992 work days. Then 4,996,611 times 75% for taxable spending, and then times 50% for in-city spending, that gets to the 1,873. And then I don't know what if you multiply by 8.75%, I think that's the tax rate, it's $164,000, and the city of Mount Vernon keeps some portion of that.
Okay, so you're taking the number, okay, so 50,000, then you're taking 75% of that, right? Okay,
And then 50%.
and then 50% of that actually being in Mount Vernon, saying, okay, you're gonna estimate that, okay, not everybody's gonna buy stuff in Mount Vernon, got it? And then also, and then taking the tax rate kind of thing and coming to a number. That's in essence what you're trying to, what we're doing?
yes.
Okay.
And
I
I'm
mean, the number's
using-
not huge, so I mean, I just needed to understand how we were getting.
How you got there.
Right, okay.
Yes, and it's the direct trades workers who can be assumed to be on site, and that's 403 workers. And hours worked 799,458 hours. So I divide that into work days. So that's a little bit of a refinement rather than saying every single worker is going to be on site the entire day.
Right.
But that's basically how we get there. Construction workers, it's just done as a lump sum over the construction period. Because obviously once complete, they are going to move on to other projects. Whereas that a very similar calculation, as you understand, is done for the on-site workers who will be working at the facility long-term. That I make the calculation based on employees. I assume that because they're more likely to live nearby, that they're spending a little bit less because of that job. I think generally a little bit more conservative on, for example, buying a lunch every single day. And when I calculate then that first year's estimated spending for the on-site employees, I estimate it out, assuming the same payroll over the full 30-year analysis period, escalated by about 3% per year, and I take the present value of the $30. So when you see that 20,000 for the construction workers, that's all occurring in a very short time frame. The on-site worker spending is smaller and it's also present value, but there aren't as many of them. So those are two differences that I do use to reflect the fact that construction is temporary. On-site workers are expected to be there permanently.
Okay, so let me shift. So there was also this addition of the tax, the transfer tax.
Yes.
What transfer tax are we talking about? Are we selling, there's some purchases that are being made? I thought all the property was already owned. So what we adding in?
We're the contract purchaser, so if we weren't moving forward with the project, the current owners wouldn't sell the land, is the idea.
So there's probably, okay, so
So they're
that
gonna-
that you're,
it's an arm's length
some
partnership.
acquisitions that you're going to get as a
They're
part
gonna
of the
sell,
project.
they're gonna sell the land and Mount Vernon has a special, this isn't the county mortgage report, this is the Mount Vernon has a special sale transfer tax, special local transfer tax that wasn't being
Yes, and it's in this report because the applicant mentioned it to your counsel, Mike Curdy. I haven't heard from the applicant directly, really at all. All of the conversations, as you understand, have been moderated. And after reviewing that, Mike Curdy said, yes, go ahead and put it in the report. The IDA will want to see that number.
You can
This
certainly.
was on your behalf.
You can certainly consider that, you know, and I think there has been public comment to say that there are certain, you know, items that the developers advanced that, you know, weren't believed to be true community benefits. Only you can make decisions as to whether those things are community benefits or not. So, you know, again, like it's all for your consideration. I want to make that clear.
Okay, so these gaps that you're showing in this report for school district and the city in year one, right? I'm trying to figure out, is there some estimation or did I miss it for the life of the pilot, what this is gonna be?
I did not include in the report a detailed schedule of the gaps. The gaps are extremely dependent on, more so than most of the analysis, the gaps are dependent on human activity as well as financial activity. So I provide them in summary. Thinking about the gap for taxes going to the city covering increased costs per resident at the facility. You see that on a net basis in the summary table on page 2. There is a more detailed table that might be more useful, which is on page 10. That's the full fiscal benefits and costs. So in the first column of this table, it's the fiscal benefit and costs just within the city of Mount Vernon itself. And then the school district is the second column, and the total effects are the third column. None of this includes effects in Westchester or
I'm
the
sorry, which
state.
page are we on?
Page 10.
Oh, yes, definitely. Okay, so I'm sorry, go ahead, I'm following you now.
I'm glad, thank you. The new incremental costs to the city budget on a present value basis are estimated at $5,959,360.
Okay.
The real property tax revenue from the project, if there's no pilot, is just over 9.9 million. That's in the first paragraph, if you will. So all other things being equal, the tax revenue would, on an aggregate basis over time, generally cover the costs to the city. Because you've got 9.9 million coming in just for the city and 5.95 million in estimated increased costs. Again, this is assuming that all 315 households are moving in from outside of the city. Any households that are moving within the city might not increase the incremental costs. So that's a summary number.
And so the negative 11.275 million, that includes the actual costs and the theoretical foregone costs. So the actual cost to the city, because I'm now confused, is just 5.959 million? Is that right? Or am I reading that wrong?
That's the estimate. Yes, that's looking at an estimate of costs in year one and simply escalating. It doesn't take into account any changes
So
in city budgets.
is it true to say that the actual revenue coming in over the life of the project to the city is 10.3 million? And the actual cost of the project to the city is just under 6 million? So there's an actual positive, just from a cash perspective, of over $4 million? The 10.3 minus the 5.959, or is that? Am I misunderstanding?
That would be an estimate. If we were simply looking at the project being built with no financial assistance, if it didn't need the financial assistance to be built, then that could in fact be the scenario. That's an estimate.
I see.
Then the 9.9 is what the property tax would be.
Right.
About the
And the 5.3 is the benefit provided.
Right.
Got it. So it's a net over 30 years of negative 89,000 of just cash.
Yes, and I do want to point out, as the board knows, but there's many other people who pay very close attention to these discussions. One of the tasks that Stores Associates does for the board is look at the cash flows and the pro forma financial statements of pro forma cash flow statements and analysis of the project operations over time. And I test the if not for the financial assistance, would this project be built? And Stores Associates found that if not for the financial assistance, this project would not be built. And I do want people to remember that when looking at this particular table, because the table is in this sense quite artificial. There is not a scenario where Stores Associates believes this project would be built without that 5.3 million estimated property tax abatement just on the city taxes.
I think that's
What you would in fact be seeing is zero new property tax revenue because there wouldn't be a project. And of course, there wouldn't be the costs.
I think
But
that's
they
a
come
fair,
together.
I think that's a fair point. I think the reality of it is that what we do know is that the project will not be able to go forward without some sort of financial assistance. I think that's just clear, right? And all that is here, that is absolutely clear. And I want to make sure that I say it. So that the public hears that I acknowledge that, I say that, right? And so we have all of these discussions about pilots and not just pilots, and should we do pilots or not? We have to do pilots, but we have to do them responsibly. So let's just be clear, all right? I had this discussion with a constituent late last night about this, right? Like, we can't spew out misnomers about what pilots are, but we need to actually educate everybody as to why they are and what makes sense, right? And what makes sense in the best interest of the city. So I acknowledge the fact that the project, without financial assistance, cannot move forward. I think what we're trying to get to is to get to the best scenario, right? For how it best benefits the city moving forward. When I say the city, I'm including, meaning all of it, right? I'm not saying city, school, cities, right? And, as a whole, which is why I'm asking these very specific questions about stuff, because just looking at the raw numbers itself, people will then develop a particular perspective about what it is, and whatever the decision of this, what ultimately is, right? They will not have the full kind of context of it, and understand it. So that's why I'm trying to drill down on what really the numbers mean. Yeah, I'm a numbers guy, I get it. You can use numbers to manipulate any kind of story, right? So let's just be clear. One for the favor, against, right? For it. So I just want to make sure it's not going to be a perfect science. Let's just be clear. This is not going to be a perfect science, but You know, if we're going to have a community, if we're going to have community benefit, we got to make sure that we have a true value of what that community benefit is. There's some things that we've been saying for a very long time that we know we want in the city. This project is adding some of that. I'm hearing the concerns of the school district too, what they're doing. I think Michael made a good point as to how is also community benefit going to help the school district in addressing some of these issues of this concern around, you know, the gap that is there, right? Or the perceived gap that is there. The other issue is that, yeah, we keep talking about the 48, 75, 33, whatever number of children, and then we throw out, well, this is worst case scenario because it's if all of the children are coming into this project, coming from outside, it adds that cost. But we know that that is not going to be the case. It is not going to be all of the 75 to 40 and 48, whatever children, right? And where I'm paused is because I'm trying to figure out, well, there's no way for us to kind of get some sort of best guess as to what happens in a ratio typically in a community like this, as to how many actually are true transplants as opposed to those that are actually folks that just come from another side or another area in Mount Vernon, right? And that's kind of like the challenge here, right? Because we do know what the worst case scenario. So then therefore, if we can't get that answer to that question, then we have to figure out how do we address kind of the perceived kind of gaps in the finances in other ways. If we can't get this other thing, right? Is that making sense? Am I making sense?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure, right? Because I'm the chief financial officer of the city,
Mhm.
not the school district, but chief financial officer of the city. And I'm trying to just wrap my head around this to try to just kind of make sure that it's just like budgets, right? Budgets are best guesstimates, right? Budgets are guidelines, and you end up, there's probably no budget that does not have a revision to it, right? And so there's going to be this kind of changes that are going to happen over the life of this project kind of going forward, right? All right, so that was my little soliloquy there. I guess I now get to get to my so I guess my point is, so how do we, all right. So how, if there's any way that we are kind of addressing, and maybe it's not here today, maybe it's someplace else, how do we address kind of if the issue around this cost, this gap?
So so one of the things that I did, because we do continue to say that 48 is if every person came from outside, every child came from out of the district. The one thing the district talks about repeatedly is they have 800 children who are homeless. That doesn't mean they're sleeping in cars and in streets. It means that they're doubled up in families' homes. They are sleeping in attics and or in basements and in the multifamily homes, and they're living in apartments doubled up, right? We have not-for-profits, we have a city, and we have churches who should be working together to make sure that every single one of these families, right? And that's the benefit of us working together, that every single one of these families who is financially eligible for this project should be putting in an application, right? Because you're serving the children, they live in the city and they're living in horrendous conditions. So let's not build anything new so that these children who are living in basements and attics have an opportunity to move into good housing, which is going to help them focus, which is going to help them have a better quality of life and be better students. So that's one thing. If we took a strict estimate, because I think, and I didn't even know the number was going to work out to this. I don't even remember what the old number is. Don't tell me. I know what now we're working with 48. I said, worst case scenario, if not all kids came from out of the district, but 70% of the kids come from out of the district, that brings us 33 and a half or 33.6 new kids. And so I don't remember what the old number was where the school district benefited, but I don't know, is that around that number?
I believe the projection from Mr. Spoli's letter was about 75, if I'm not mistaken, like.
Well, I'm talking about what the projection had been done by Ms. Stores.
Oh, I don't know,
The
sorry,
initial one. Huh?
It had been 33.
33.
Third, yeah. Who knew? Yeah, okay. So that's just interesting because at about a 33, the school district was benefiting, right? We would be irresponsible and backwards as a whole entire city of Mount Vernon City. That is, if every single person who moved into this building was not from Mount Vernon and didn't currently live here in one capacity, whether they live in an attic, a basement, or they were upgrading or downgrading from an apartment in another building, then we shouldn't build anything, right? We shouldn't build anything, anywhere, market rate or anything. That's one thing. So that for me kind of addresses the gap, the perceived gap, right? We would be doing a horrible job as a city and a school district if not one of our children who currently attend the schools get into this building. One thing. The second thing is we talk about the community benefit on the city side, because there is, as we see here, about a $33,000 gap per year. And what was that on page? Because I like to dig down into the numbers too. And I want to make sure. So on page 9, it said negative 33,723 excess gap pilot over levy needed for the city. So the one thing that we've been talking about here in the city for the past 4 years that I've been here, 4 years and almost a month now, is that we can't A, fit in City Hall, and B, Mount Vernon has no kind of city-run youth facility, that our youth bureau has been homeless. And so when we started this conversation, we said, can our youth bureau utilize this space? Can we have some time there? We moved from getting some time there to the youth bureau managing the space and having it. We're currently paying $110,000 a year in rent to just run our programs across the street in a rental building. We could save that because we have a facility. Even if we have to pay nominal rent for utilities and cleaning of the area, that's something that we manage, we operate, and we don't have to build because we sure don't have money. It could take us years to get to the place, and our young people need services now. And I'm going to say this because, you know, there are lots of people who will clearly say, people have said, oh, well, you know, you're trying to do this project because these are your friends. Sometimes you put people who you know and work with through the ringer more than you put anyone else through the ringer. And this $8 million facility that I asked them to build had absolutely nothing to do with housing. I don't think anyone who's built housing anywhere in the city is proposing building something that is not housing and is not going to get them that type of financial benefit. Us knowing that the west end of the city is more quickly growing than anything else and probably the most under-resourced in our community insofar as not having not-for-profit organizations, not having space, not having any city facilities over there. I actually did the opposite. Instead of jumping through hoops to help them, I asked this developer, and I don't know you, Jonathan, right? I asked this developer to do two things. And look back on all IDA meetings and you can see it's consistent. They came in at 30 to 80% AMI. I said, absolutely not. I said, we have people who are making more in Mount Vernon and we don't want to not include them. And so they pushed it from 40% to 90% average median income, meaning that if people go and get job training like we expect them to do, they're not quickly at the ledge of being kicked out of the building now because they go over the income limits. Because we want economic mobility. We don't want to build housing with such narrow affordability gaps that if we do what we're supposed to do with the city, with some of our industrial partners that people's income wouldn't increase, and our education system, right? We're about economic mobility and education so people can get more affordable, more living wage jobs. And so they address that. Like I said, the second thing is knowing that we have a dearth in community facilities. And I think the Armory wasn't open because it was COVID, but at least the Armory was something that we still had that could be active if it wasn't in COVID. So, there's a question, and we are looking at worst case scenario. If every single person who moved in this building was new to the school district, if every person in this building was new moving into the city, then there would be a gap. If every single person. I don't know if we only put that on the developers or if we put some of that on ourselves as institutions in the city to make sure that that's not true. And it's a lottery also, right?
Yeah.
So the probability of every single person who applies to this building, if no one in Mount Vernon applies, then no one will get in it.
That's right.
If we all wait until the ribbon cutting, then no one will get in it. But when the applications are open, we're doing our job as city employees, school district employees, elected leaders, faith-based leaders, not-for-profit organizations, and get people to do their applications. Then, we've seen people stand up when we put out the guaranteed income. I believe there were 1,300 people who completed that application for the benefit of $500 a month, right? So we know when we work and when we market and when we rally together, then we can educate people and get people to apply for things that are of their benefit. I don't think in the past there have been those type of coordinated efforts here in the city. And thus, you get new properties that city residents don't get into. But that's incumbent upon us.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that we have housing infrastructure throughout the city that is some of the oldest and worst maintained. Right. And we have to do better. We have to provide better opportunities. And if the only way we can ever do it is without a pilot, that's not going to happen. Right. Because the market rate housing will if all we do is build market rate housing, and trust me, I'm all for more market rate housing. Right. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we're providing clean, safe workforce housing. So those are just some of my thoughts on this and looking at the gaps, because as the controller says, putting context to the gaps, there are gaps on this piece of paper, but those gaps assume that every single person who moves into this building will not currently live in any shape, form, or fashion in Mount Vernon. And I just don't believe that would be the scenario. So, even if it is on the city side, with $110,000 that we're currently paying in rent to provide space for our youth bureau programs to operate, then the city saves, even if we pay whatever amount a month we're using the space. That's just some of my thoughts.
Madam Mayor, what we'd like to do as the developers is to.
That's something that must be outside. It's probably something outside.
Great, thank you for that, Madam Mayor. We'd like to offer to the school district and the city that we'd like to co-host some outreach events, maybe at the city facility and the school district building. Very aggressively, we'll have the Bantha company there, we'll have the co-developers will, once the applications come available, right, be closer to the end of construction, we'll be very aggressive in terms of outreach to Mount Vernon residents. And we will co-host, we'll have interpreters there. We did some in New Rochelle for our project in New Rochelle. We had a Spanish interpreter there and so on and so forth. So we would like to.
I think even better than that, because sometimes our residents need a longer runway.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So I think there needs to be, and not just on this developer, but on all of the developers that are coming before us, that it should be community education sessions, what it means to apply.
Okay.
If the applications came out in May, we don't need to do the education in May. We need to start it in February saying, what will you even need? You know, how do you do this? Because that's been the challenge.
Yeah.
The challenge has been that in Mount Vernon, we haven't traditionally built workforce housing. You know, we built senior housing, and even with that, it was interesting, you know, when 22 opened, when we did the ribbon cutting, I got a whole bunch of phone calls from people saying, how do I get in that building? I said 6 months ago, right? But I hadn't been here 6 months ago, and we hadn't been in leadership 6 months ago. So there hadn't been that type of coordinated education and outreach to the community. It would be interesting to know of the children that live in 22 right now, since y'all have that data and that information, how many of them were already students and residents in the school district. It would be interesting. That might be informative in one way or another. Or did all of the students of the, what do you have on here, 30? Or did all of the 30 students in that building come from outside of Mount Vernon, right? Because again, that would be a good piece of information to have. Because if it is, then a terrible job was done. And then we know the mistakes not to make again, but we're not in leadership when that happened. What I am, before ever being mayor, is somebody who worked in housing for 30 years. And what I refuse to do is make sure that projects come in here, and they get a tax benefit from the city. And no one in our city benefits from that project. That can't happen, right? And so, you know, part of that becomes our job to make sure that that does not happen. And that's through coordinating with school, with the churches, and with the 40 not-for-profit plus programs that are already in Mount Vernon. We know that we are housing constrained, and we have to find a way out of this constraint to make it work, period.
So, yeah, here's my issue.
Mhm.
We should. What he students not knowing exactly what we're talking about is wish. We start to begin to think about how do we make the decision to whether this makes sense. We have to figure out some methodology about how we're doing this. So the mayor threw out 70%. So if we're going to use that number and we say that that's the methodology, and that's how we kind of make the decision, but not to come up with, that's why I asked the question, like, is there a way for us to determine how many children actually in the previous projects that we had were Mount Vernon and went into the project? And the answer may be no.
Mhm.
And so, and I get that. So if the answer is no, then we have to determine, like we do when we create budgets for the city, right? A budgetary assumption. What's the assumption? Not just that we know that it's not going to be 48, but what's the assumption? So, and it could be off, right? But we got to figure it out. What is reasonable, right? Is it reasonably to say that they're going to be 70% of those people that are going to be Mount Vernon folks, or 70% of those that are not going to be Mount Vernon folks, right? Because if we know that, then we know what we're kind of working with. In that. That's not only thing. And maybe there's not a way, but that's my very logical kind of process of, okay, let's agree to that, because then you know what, I can defend that. Bottom line is, this is where we kind of you put it as a assumption for, we figure at best case scenario, right? It's going to be this number. I think you came down to, if you believe that that number actually is going to be 33.
Mhm.
Then this is how we kind of came to that. And the mayor may have given a good rubric for it for the guest, right?
I didn't even know what the old
We
number
just
was.
have to make sure that we are comfortable kind of with that. And then as the years go on, make sure that we actually are monitoring what that really is. Right? For it. That's the moment.
Mhm.
It's the school district.
Right.
The city piece of it, yeah. $110,000 is what they say that they are spending based upon what we just got from for folks down, my folks downstairs in the youth bureau. Right, so if that's the case, and we're looking at $33,000 already cut this gap, do we know what? And we know that whatever the nominal the grant, whatever it is,
Mhm.
it cannot exceed what? $76,000
Right.
a year. Otherwise, we are reducing, right? So, right, so long as we know that,
Mhm.
then we know what we're talking about when we get to the place of negotiation as to what it is, because my position has always been, I don't want us going into something that is going to be kind of a loss to the city.
Right.
Right?
Mhm.
Right, that's the way I've stood, I kind of put my stake.
And we are all right there with you.
Yeah.
So,
And I think in fairness, controllers, with what the mayor mentioned, the 30% number, that is an accepted number, generally speaking. Now, that said, you know, the
30% was that 30% of the people who move in there would already be within the community.
correct.
And that's 70%.
Yes.
I thought that 50-50 was too generous, right? Knowing the patterns of the past.
Yeah.
But 70%
It's a fair assumption.
So you said 33, so you get down to number that they are basically going to be 33 new that.
Now that all said, to your point, which is, you know, how do we fix this going forward, right? And I think the first step that this board has taken is the engagement with the school district. I mean, I think the answer to your question is to go back in time, they probably won't have that ability to do so because
No.
all these things happened, you know, before this.
Too long ago, they happened last year, you might.
Exactly.
You look at residency change.
Right.
But I get it.
But that report that we created for the school district to input those numbers, that should be updated every year. And when we do a project going forward, we should update the numbers so that we can say, you know, wow, like it was really 50%, or wow, it was 60%, whatever the number is. So it's reflective of, you know, what the data set is for Mount Vernon.
And I'm okay with that. So as long as we're going down this pathway, then my headache is going away
Right.
a little bit, right? I think that the other thing is that earlier on, I think absolutely there has to be discussion in with the school district and the city around also what other kinds of services and things that are needed for the community space thing. And help to try to fill this other kind of aspect of this gap, right? I think the combination of those kind of settle it and begin to make it a little bit more reasonable for it. And again, remember something here. This is our first one. We're trying to do the best that we can. I will stand on the position and maybe it might be, I'm not necessarily, I am a part of the position. I'm not gonna say I'm not, but I am effective in positions. But the reality of it is that I'm not going to make just a political decision. Right, on any of this, right? For me, it's going to be hard, whatever decisions are around these pilots. But I still stand with my stake in the ground and say that we have to do pilots, but we have to do them responsibly. Right? We absolutely have to do them responsibly. You can't do them the same way that they have been being done. Right? They just absolutely cannot. And so this is the first go round of this to look at it and say, you know, this is what we need to do. I just need to get those fiscal kinds of things.
And I think the other thing too that we should drill down on is the unit composition in the buildings, because, you know, we should have, you know, the best data going forward. We want to be sensitive, obviously, to the privacy issues of all the students. You know, we're not looking for any of that information, but what we are looking for is just, you know, data points so that you can make the most data-driven decision you possibly can, and that it's updated frequently.
And I mean, that's really what's important for me, as the controller said, and it's something that this board has talked about, that pilots done in the past have been incredibly irresponsible and incredibly hurtful to the city as well as the school district. I wouldn't doubt that, right? I wouldn't doubt that. You know, deep pilots on market rate and luxury housing. Who does that? Right? Who does that? You know, that's not the best, right? But to do nothing, to not provide opportunities for children and families who are in less than ideal, right? I don't want to say, they're not necessarily living in squalor.
Right.
But, I grew up with my mother as a single mother, and we lived, I guess, by those standards, I would have been considered homeless because we doubled up in the house with my grandparents and my aunts and uncles, right? Me and my mother shared a bedroom in the house. And that's how I lived the first 8 years of my life, right? So I understand, doubling up and not always having all that you want. And then I understood the difference of when I had more space and I had a room. I eventually had to share it with Kim, right? But to have your own space, right? And so we have to look at projects that give an opportunity, but then like we said, projects that have that community benefit, right? There has to be the community benefit. And little did we know back then that the community benefit would be of this scale. At that time, I think we're talking about having not-for-profits run it. But I know that our youth bureau and our recreation department works with a lot of people. We had the opportunity, I had the opportunity, I did it yesterday, right? To go and look at a project similar, over in New Rochelle, and the staff of the recreation department and the youth bureau were like, oh my God, right? For us to be able to have something new, a basketball court, a commercial kitchen, classroom space to do workshops and programs for our kids. Right now, they're in a basement. I mean, we're happy for the space that we're paying $110,000 for, but it's in a basement, and there is no run, jump, and play space. It's classrooms or just office spaces that we operate our programs out of. And our kids in Mount Vernon deserve better. And, that's what excites me about this project. That's what excites me potentially about other projects, is the amount of community space that we are requesting and requiring from people who bring projects before us. Because the city is not in the position to go out and build an $8 million, 11,000 square foot new facility for our kids. We're not in that position. And so that is a real true community benefit to this project. And so, that's kind of just, like we said, we're not making it easy. We're exacting a lot because we as the city don't have space. We, unlike the Youth Bureau of White Plains, don't have a closed down school that the city bought, where now the city gets to run several floors of programming. We don't have the Greenberg Theodore Community Center, where the city, owns that and taps into that. We don't have that. We don't have the PAL building in Yonkers, along with the YM and the YWCA and the Boys and Girls Club. We have the Dole Center, which is heavily senior, and Rose Simon. So there's not a lot of space, and for one of the most densely populated communities in the state of New York, well, the most densely populated community in the state of New York. The community space gives place for our children and is a true community benefit. And in no way do we want to hurt the school district, right? The school district, yes, you are sitting on the board. Yes, you're a non-voting member, but you're here. And the initial concerns that the school district had years ago about the IDA is that, I just had a meeting with DCJ, is that years ago, you didn't have information. Years ago, you didn't have a voice at the table. Years ago, you couldn't ascertain if what the deal was or what the pilot was. You've gotten all of the information the same time we get it. You're at the table, right? So I think that brings us further than the school district and the city have been in decades. And the UTEP, the Universal Tax Exemption Policy that this board created, which is the first time it's been updated in 30 years, Or have we ever had one?
I would say almost like 10 years, Mayor. Certainly, it's been quite some time.
They had one too.
I think so.
They had one and they used it?
What were you thinking?
Where we using? I don't think we had one.
Yeah.
Or not one that we were using. And so, you hear our controller, he's a man of numbers, right? I'm a woman of numbers and I don't have to manage the cash flow. But the work that we're able to do is based on the cash flow. So we're all looking at it and we've all had to sit at this table and other tables within the last 4 years and suffer because of past deals that were made that weren't even close to being held accountable, right? And being fair to anyone. And so we can't get everything out of one project that we're gonna need for the city. But we can't be stuck in what was done in the past. And I'm finished. Ryan.
Yeah.
Stephanie,
I
y'all
just
have any
wanna-
comments?
I just want to echo the sentiments of, what's your capacity in this meeting? The vice chair?
Vice
You
chair.
had so many titles. I agree, I understand, the business aspect of it, notwithstanding the bad reputation pilots have gotten specifically here in Mount Vernon, understanding a little bit about business. They're absolutely necessary for the city to obtain the housing that we need. And so, I'm gonna be in support of anything that is responsible, right? I think we've worked with the school district at length on the UTEP, we were actively involved. We went to court, we discussed it with the judge about what was a fair and equitable way for the school district to be heard on these issues. And they were heard on these issues. And my understanding is that, it has put some controls on pilots and sets the expectation at a responsible level. And we're gonna, as I'm hearing from the mayor and the comptroller, we're gonna hold people to that, right? And the project is still developing. And this is not the last day that people are gonna have an opportunity to be heard on it. We still have a long way to go. This is just an initial step. And I'm sure at some point you'll talk about if we decide to take a vote today, what the next steps will be. And so, right.
And Miss Spate, because I've been looking up there,
Yeah,
it's one of her comments earlier was talking about the 10%. I know y'all offered 10% local hiring and things of that nature and using, whether it's electricians or window companies or whatever, for there to be benefit to the city. And I know kind of like with the city, when we're talking about MWBE, sometimes it's hard to beat high numbers because you got to find the people who are here. So I'm just going to say the assumption is that the 10% is what you're offering, but that's the floor, not the ceiling, right? But that's the floor, not the ceiling. And then the other thing is, as you move forward, because we know it's great to have projects built, but it's the management going forward. And that's something that we would like to work with you, because oftentimes it's the management of these properties that is poor, that brings problems. So, responsible management of the properties. Do you intend to have cameras outside of your buildings in the area?
Well, first of all, thank you for your comments. And the NRP management will manage the project, so it's not like being handed off. We will be the manager. It's our logo, it's our uniform there, and then we have an extensive security protocol, cameras, fob blocks. Absolutely.
Because that's something that we're
Internally
definitely
next week.
looking to propose here in the city of Mount Vernon, is any buildings being forward or currently that have over a certain number of units have cameras, because that helps to make our community more secure, and then your management team having proper screening of residents or, potential people is just very, very important, because it's not about just filling the building. It's about responsibly filling the building. And I know that's a further along conversation, but those are just some of my concerns. And Ms. Spate, I wanted to speak to that comment that she had. on social media.
The other thing is, I wanted to add, I had an opportunity to visit the facility in their show yesterday. I was very impressed with the quality of the work that I saw, the appliances that were there, the large open windows for light and air, and how solid the walls were. I was really impressed by that, because now a lot of times you don't get that level of construction, so I was impressed by that.
And we welcome any member of the IDA, Stephanie, Saunders, to attend a tour of the show as well.
Okay, is there any other comments from board members? So what does we do now?
So the next step is, I'm just going to read again the friendly amendment, for your consideration. As the Corporation Council indicated, this resolution just provides authority for the agency to move forward to negotiate agreements. There's no obligations until those agency documents are entered into, signed by both parties. So just want to make that clear for the record. Second, the new section 7 again is documents, which is all the transaction documents related to the project, shall include a provision whereby the parties will enter into a negotiation of a lease agreement that appoints the City of Mount Vernon Youth Bureau and/or Department of Recreation as a manager of the community space for the term of the tax agreement and any extensions thereof, subject to the agreement on certain economics and the inclusion of commercially reasonable terms of operation, which includes a provision for nominal rent. Section 8 is the company agrees to use best efforts to hire City of Mount Vernon residents for 10% of the labor of construction related items and direct costs of 10%. And again, as the mayor indicated, that's the floor not the ceiling on the project. And those are just two friendly amendments for your consideration. So in terms of procedure, I think the first thing is a motion to adopt those friendly amendments, and then perhaps a motion to consider adoption of the resolution.
I make a motion to adopt the amendments as read by Michael Purdy. I'll second.
Second? Second by the commissioner. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? There being none, the friendly amendment is adopted. Now before you is the amended resolution 1-2024-3 with those additions to 7 and 8 and a movement of the enacting clause to section 9, which is the resolution will take effect immediately. Is there a motion to consider the resolution?
Make a motion for the board to consider resolution 1/2024-3.
Is there a second?
I second.
A second by the commissioner. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? There being none, the resolution is adopted. Thank you very much. Mayor, there's no further business for the board to consider.
So now, once that we do the all the terms and everything we discussed.
Yes.
So we need to address.
Yeah, what we'll do from here is, when we draft the documents, we'll circulate them to the board. So if there's any comments from the board members, we'll make sure they're incorporated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting, IDA meeting.
I second it.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Being none. You're adjourned.
Thank you all.
I have to run across the street to PB.
Do you need me
Did
to
we
go?
end